company based in the US, and now he's heading the Lowe's Innovation Lab, basically bringing lots of new science and lots of new innovation into the field of business, basically from everything from basically robotics to neuroscience, which tells a lot. So I'll let Carl tell something about his background, but then also present some of his take on what we should do and what we are doing. So, and then I'll be back after that. So.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to be on the mic right here, so I'm not going to beatbox, I promise. I told my wife I'd stop doing that. Okay, great. This keynote stuff, who knows? Is it? All right, so before I start, so thank you for staying to the end of the day. I'm sure everyone's really tired, because after the 5th Coke, it starts to wear off. So I run this innovation labs thing, which I'll talk about in a second. But to start off, I'm a classically trained marketing researcher. So I got my MBA from the University of Wisconsin at the A.C. Nielsen Center for Marketing Research. So everything that I say hereafter, I have been schooled in the traditional ways of marketing research, and I did believe it for a very long time, and now I don't. So this kind of talk that I'm going to give is going to be a little bit like preaching to the choir. When I typically give this in marketing research circles, there's a lot of booze, and all of a sudden rancid fruit appears and it gets thrown at me. So this will hopefully be a nicer experience, but I'm sure it'll be a little different. Okay, so what does the Innovation Labs do? It comes from this understanding that that clients and buyers, traditionally buyers of research and companies, can't wait around for stuff to come to them. Because as soon as it comes to me, it's available to my competitors as well. So it's no longer a competitive advantage because they can do it too. So to that end, what we've done is decided to go out and work with really early stage startups and even academics and other places that have this intellectual property or this nugget of an idea, and we go to them, and this is what I do, is I identify who they are, and I go to them and I say, hey, you've got something really cool. How about you come into the Lowe's lab, which actually have many labs throughout the world. One that you may have seen, we announced a partnership with NASA. Yes, NASA, Lowe's and NASA. I was as shocked as you. And we work with them, we work through all the messy stuff, and then what happens is they come out of that, and if it's successful, I have this consortium of 49 of the world's largest organizations, everything from Chick-fil-A, from those of you here in the US, all the way to the World Bank. And we are all non-competing, we get together and we talk about innovation, everything from marketing research through robotics, and I share that with that broad consortium. And so Thomas was one of the first ones. So what I did was I recognized that neuroscience or neuromarketing, I must say I don't think that term encompasses what this does, what neuromarketing is capable of. But applied neuroscience in its proper use could be huge for us. And so Thomas and I had met in a previous life. I was trying to get a PhD from him, but decided to go work for Walmart instead, which was a crazier experience. And brought him in and I said, hey man, like, you have some amazing things. If you can build this out, I'll work with you and we'll fund it and get it all going. And here we are. And here we are about a year or so later. And now we have this thing called Neurons. And it's been hugely successful inside of Lowe's. And especially inside of Innovation Labs. And one of the reasons why I have this new cool job is because of Thomas. Because it's proven so successful. So we can talk offline about how awesome really using neuromarketing or applied neuroscience, as I call it, is. All right, so real quick, this is what I do. All right, good old graph here, change in time. This is what scares me and should scare everybody else here, right? Whether you're an applied neuroscience company or you're a straight up marketing research firm or whatever you do, if you have revenue coming in, you have a target on your chest. And if you don't realize that, you're already toast, right? So here's what happens. You got the linear path to doom where people are doing incremental improvement. They're doing a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. No one's doing anything wrong, right? You're not having an Enron situation. No one's doing anything terrible. They're just improving and not innovating. And that's how you get blockbustered, and that's how you get Kodak. And yes, those are verbs. And it happens pretty quickly. And you don't see it happen because change is exponential. And so what happens is that we're very good at thinking linearly, right? We're very terrible at thinking about things as it goes exponentially up the curve, right? So I can think about maybe how things might change 3 or 4-fold, but if you take it to the nth degree, I have no possible way of thinking about that because my brain, as Steve just laid out, is just not set up for that. So to think that we can, we are just fooling ourselves. So what happens is you have other things that come into the market that destroy your business. And so this huge, wonderful platform that you've spent all this time building up and changing, it gets wiped out in one fell swoop. And you see that happen with Blockbuster, you see that happen with Circuit City, and these huge, venerable brands that you never thought would go away, gone. Gone. And so that kind of stuff scares me and scares our executives, and that's why we're doing this thing called Innovation Labs. Okay, I'd like to talk about the indescribable, indestructible, nothing can stop it blob, that is marketing research. Marketing research is a disaster. You can quote me. It is an unmitigated disaster. Let me tell you why. You guys probably all know, that's why you're in this room. It is built on a set of assumptions. The main one being, I can ask you what you think, and you can tell me what you think. That does not work out. Or even worse, I can ask you why you did the thing you did, and you will tell me why, and that's really the reason why you did it. That clearly is not the case. I don't know why I put on this jacket. My wife laid it out for me. You should ask her. So all of these things are built on that, and like 99.9% of marketing research up until this point has been based on question and answer. Let me tell you a quick story that kind of illustrates this point. So I used to work for Walmart. Yes, Walmart. I used to live in Bentonville, Arkansas. My wife describes it as imagine a place and then take away stuff. That's Bentonville, Arkansas. We left when my daughter was 3 weeks old to move to Charlotte, so I will tell you a little bit about Bentonville, Arkansas. So anyways, a quick story. So one of my favorite things to do was I used to be one of the few researchers on the grocery side of the business, which was really great. And what I would do is bring in these merchants, and these merchants are really powerful people. They make dreams and break dreams every day, right? The scale of Walmart is incredible. So actually a fantastic company. And so these merchants would come in, they would have very specific purchase kind of criteria, toothpaste for instance. And I would love to take these merchants over to their section, and we'd stand out and talk to customers, right? Who hasn't done an ethnography or whatever you want to call it, and a shop along, whatever you want to call it. And I would sit there and we would say, oh ma'am, why did you pick up the Tartar Control crest in the red box? Oh, well, you know, my mom used to wear red a lot. And it really, just really evokes this powerful memory in me. And they would give these wild explanations of things, or you know, the 33% extra is really something that's important to me, or whatever. And you would just see the merchant just furiously writing, thinking they've just come up with gold. And then what would happen is, I'd just be coyly kind of waiting for this to happen. Then I'd say, let's go outside, and let's wait for people to come out. And as they were coming out, just holding bags, not people pushing the trolley or the carts, or depending on what part of the country or world you're from, the cart or the buggy, and just holding bags in their hands, say, if you can tell me half of the stuff that you got, half of the things you got, you just purchased, you just bought, I will give you a $20 gift card. So how many people do you think can guess half of the things that they just got? This is not real science, this is me and my... No. Any guesses?
No.
Well, it's a little higher than that. Let's give a little credit to our friends in the South of the United States, huh?
One.
About half, right? But they're not saying the Tartar Control crest in the red box that reminded me of my mother. They're saying toothpaste. They're saying chicken. They're saying milk, right? So there's a disconnect between the way that at the shelf that they say they're making the decisions, and then the way that they're actually remembering or what those things are. But how's most marketing research done? After they bought the stuff, and they're asking questions about that. But what happens is if you ask a rational question to a person, they're going to give you a rational answer back. Are they lying? No, they're not lying. You just asked the wrong way. So people can't always tell you what you want to know, but they will give you an answer. So what we have is this thing where we are sitting in these rooms just poring over the statistical difference between this garbage answer and that garbage answer and making decisions based on garbage results. And that's really what it is, let's be honest, right? And then the other thing is people are influenced out of things out of the realm of their understanding, right? So I was actually going to show that video, Steve, so thanks for stealing that awesome video. But it is really, really good because it shows that we are influenced beyond our realm of understanding, right? So they can't say that they really were influenced by those things, but that was what drove their behavior. So I'm going to show a fun video. Did I break it? Okay.
When you ask
Little Jimmy
people who
Kimmel.
won the debate, there's about a 90% chance they're going to say it was the candidate they support. But I always wonder how many of these people actually watched the debate. So we conducted a little experiment this afternoon. The presidential debate started at 6 o'clock here in LA. So today we went out onto Hollywood Boulevard at 2 o'clock to ask people who they thought won last night's debate. Now there was no debate last night, which makes this opinion poll a lot more interesting. Enjoy.
Who do you think won last night's presidential debate?
I'm gonna go with Obama. I must say he was stronger this time around in his choice of answering questions and everything. The best part for me, I have to say, is I think there was booing. Wasn't there booing on a certain? Was it McRomney? Was it McRomney or was it Obama? It was McRomney, right? I have to say, yeah, that'd probably be my highlight, the booing on McRomney's behalf.
Who do you think won the presidential debate last night?
That was definitely Mr. Obama.
Yeah, any highlights from the debate?
No, just I'm glad he was a little bit more alert this time and not so slacking like he did before.
Did you watch the whole thing?
Oh yeah.
Were there any highlights for you?
There were so many, I can't even tell you. Great debate.
Did you like it more than the first one?
Oh, much better.
Did you like the town hall style?
I did. No casual.
Were there any questions in particular you liked, or?
How they're going to fix the economy.
And what did you think of the town hall style debate?
I liked it. I thought it was more intimate. I thought it brought them closer to the people.
So we can keep going, but when I saw that, it sent shivers through my whole body of how much money I'd spent as a marketing researcher asking questions like that and getting verbatims back that were like that, and thinking that's really how people were thinking and that they had actually, watched the debate that never happened. So that's scary, right? So people don't always tell the truth, and that's a big deal, right? Really big deal. So the way I like to describe it is that we think we're going to this well. It's supposed to be a well, by the way. A well of beautiful, pristine water. We think we're dipping into this beautiful well of mineral-rich, delicious, glacier-fed water and getting this insight and this knowledge as we're asking people questions. What we're really getting is something like this. It's a big, gnarly cesspool full of junk. And because everyone's hands are in it, it's not the cleanest thing in the world. And it wasn't even that great to begin with because it's in a big, rusty old cistern. And so yes, there is something inherently wrong with the way we ask stuff and the way that we position things. So this is kind of, my, once again, non-scientific view of marketing research, but it's way, way out of balance. We're asking way too many questions, and we are not doing the important things like the observational neuro work that we could do. And largely this is a problem with inertia and what buyers of marketing research are comfortable with, and with, quite frankly, these big marketing research companies have built these massive platforms and invested heavily in them, and now they're trying to make money off it, which isn't a bad idea, but things have improved drastically and we can get much better insights. Anybody know who this guy is? Oh my gosh, I've given this presentation so many times, no one knows who this is. Sir, I will buy you a Snickers. Okay, so Stephen Covey, he wrote a really famous book called 7 Habits of Highly Successful People that I was forced to read in college many times because I went to BYU. And he did 4 quadrants here, right? Things that are urgent, things that are important. And most of the things we do are urgent. And what do you think? On a day-to-day basis, inside of a company, your company, my company, what do you do? Urgent and? I don't know if they're all that important. I spend a lot of my day doing email. Would you say email is really all that important? If it didn't happen that second, you'd probably survive. But it has to happen right now, right? The really big stuff, the stuff that changes your company, once again, you go back to the linear path to doom, right? You have all those guys are working on things that were urgent and probably not all that important in the grand scheme of things. But folks like Nest, folks like Apple, they're working largely on big innovative things that are not important at not urgent at the moment, but very important, right? So he argues that that's a really big deal. But I would say most marketing research is not important and not urgent. So Steve briefly talked on most research is done after the fact, right? And they're really, let's be honest, they're really not going to change their mind. And so you're spending a lot of time and money doing something that's just based on a system that even if the results are different, you're not going to change your behavior. So that's the fundamental wrong issue, not necessarily with marketing research, but with the process that we've built around it, right? So if you ask most buyers of marketing research, in a candid moment at a bar or whatever, they'll tell you that probably 80% of research they're probably not going to change anything about. Huge, huge problem. And you hear this all this time, oh, marketing researchers are having a hard time getting a seat at the table, blah, blah, blah. That is so not an issue. If you go to a business owner and you're providing value, they will drag you to the table over and over and over again. The problem with marketing research is that they're too caught up in process and not enough on providing results. So for us and for the lab, it's all about changing behavior. If it doesn't change the internal behavior of my company, or won't, or especially the outside, like from a customer point of view, it's not worth my time. And I think that's a criteria that's not used enough. So I would say that most marketing research falls in this, well, it's just too big to fail. This is we've got baselines since Joan of Arc. We have to have this normative database, or else I don't know what. Something terrible is going to happen. Who cares? If it's not providing value, it's not worth it. So we've taken a really hot knife to a lot of these old databases, and we're just fine. We're actually doing a lot better. And the company's liking a lot more because they're making more sense. So I would say if it's too big to fail, you probably should get rid of it. So real quick, how do you kill the blog? So you're asking customers everything and doing whatever they say is not customer-centric. It's actually a really bad idea. If it's right, why doesn't it work? I used to get that all the time as a marketing researcher. If these results are right, how come it failed? Right? And usually, bases will say that, it's a problem with execution. I would say not always. And then reframe how we think. So I would say let's move from what is statistically significant. I'm not saying let's throw all of that away. I'm just saying the main question should be what will cause a change in behavior, not what is mathematically correct, as the first question. And then let's get over the sunk cost fallacy. So I don't care how much we spent in the past. If it's not the best method right now, we should move on. And then transparency. That was my big issue with neuromarketing in the past. I'd use a lot of the big names when I was at Walmart and other places. It was so black boxy, it scared me. So as a client, I didn't know if what I was seeing was noise or some sort of weird interpretation. What they were saying was insights. Because there was so much black box involved. And so with Neurons, it was one of the big deals with Neurons, there's no black box. So I can really see in what's going on and make sure it's not some weighted average issue. And that also scares clients quite a bit. And then lastly, it's all about better, faster, cheaper. And it really does exist. You really can get better, cheaper, and faster. And we've proven that with Neurons. Drive the cost significantly down, time significantly down, and it's intuitive and easy for people to understand. And lastly, I would just say beware of the blob. So your blob it's probably different than mine, but everyone has one. So you have to identify what it is, and you kill it. Okay, that's it. Turn to Thomas. Thanks.
So beware of the blob. Let's see how that goes. Thanks, Mal. Any questions? We can take.
Yeah, we can come there.
One of the things I'd like to talk to about today is basically how we can move from doing copy testing, how we can change the way in which we test in-store behavior, basically. And that's one of the things we did for example, for Lowe's, but also many other clients as well. It's beyond the copy testing itself. Because when it comes to doing in-store testing, we need to get away from this kind of whole testing in a big lab. We need to rethink how we test as a new marketer, basically. But once we do that, it's kind of opening a lot of the ways in which we can ask this kind of unconscious questions, questions about the unconscious responses. So that's what I'm going to talk about. One of the things that we at Neurons have basically done is to take a step back and say, well, what do we actually know? What is just the past, it's not like 20, 30 years of neuroscience and combined with psychology, what has that really brought us? And one of the things that we identify is at least 4 different metrics. So one is visual attention, one thing is arousal, we have motivation, and then something we call cognitive load. I'm not going to talk about cognitive load today, but it's one of the things that, basically being able to keep information in your mind, for a few seconds at any one time. So that's kind of, if you overload that system, people are going to drop off, they're going to miss the message, basically. But what I want to talk about today is how we can understand attentional processes and also arousal and motivation. I'm not going to give you the kind of all the details about how we get there. I think Steve Sands actually gave a lot of information about especially arousal and motivation here, but I'm going to tap into that briefly as well. But let us start by looking at attention. So if you read any textbook in neuropsychology and neuroscience, according to neuroscience, you will basically get this point that, well, there are two different processes. And Steve Genko has kind of shown this kind of bottom up and top down. You could rephrase that as say, well, there are things you're looking for and there's things you bump into, basically. That's two different attentional mechanisms. So things like looking for a particular product, looking for a particular brand, that is kind of the looking for process. But then the other thing, going down the mall and basically you're grabbing stuff along the way because you're just bumping into it and you like it and then you grab it. That's kind of the second process. So understanding those two different processes, first of all, being able to disentangle them is really crucial. And then being able to make profit from that understanding and being able to assess that is the kind of the second process. So this is the thing that I'm going to talk about. And in many different walks, as consumers, we are exposed to busy environments, basically. Web browsing, strolling down the road outside, reading a magazine, being unattentive to commercials, basically. There are several ways in which we're not really paying that much attention, is it? So, I'll actually do a small magic trick here. I'm not sure, let's hope that works, but one of the things I'd like to do here is basically show you some cards. And what I want you to do is just pick a card, remember the card is going to be gone in a few seconds, okay? So the card's coming up, I want you to pick a card, remember it, okay? Here we go. The card is coming up, point to a card, take the card, remember the card is gone, okay? So remember the card, okay, in your head. Now we're going to take that away. To the what? Your card is gone, isn't it? Right. How do I do that? I took all the cards away. All the cards were away. Let's replay it loud. You can pick another card if you want to, right? So you basically pick a card, they're gone, and now I'm showing you a completely different set of cards. So what does that tell us? It tells us that when you focus at some things, that it's at the cost of other things. Right? Attention is a limited resource. So it's a costly resource. It's really important for us when we focus on something, that's always at the cost of other things. Right? So whenever we are focusing actively on something, or whether our attention is brought to an explosion outside, whatever, it's at the cost of thinking of other things. It's a precious resource. So, the stuff you look for and the stuff you bump into. Now, walking through the aisle, or outside, or wherever in this kind of busy environment, there is this kind of process, continuous back and forth. It's both processes at any one time. There's things you look for, and then there's stuff you bump into. And some of those things we actually understand so well that we can describe them very well. We can attend to them. And one of the things that I've done, is spending 3 geeky years to develop this kind of algorithm that can predict parts of that process. So, for example, what we call here, I can show you while I talk, is basically it's an algorithm that mimics parts of the visual system that is really focused on bottom-up processes, what you bump into, the things in an image or a video that is automatically going to grab people's attention. So it's not a kind of a process of whether you like a face, whether you're looking for something red or blue. It is only about what you're most likely to bump into. So this means that you can check web pages, you can check, walk through the aisle, and it's basically going to say something about these things are the things that you're most likely, your eyes are going to glaze over. You're going to hit those targets. So several ways you can use this. In the store, you can test ads, you can test web pages, tons of stuff. The nice thing is, of course, that this has been, first of all, it's been really tested with eye tracking. So it's over 80% accurate when it comes comparing that to eye tracking, which also shows you that what people are actually paying attention to when they're looking at eye tracking is actually bottom-up driven. They bump into stuff. So the nice thing about that, it doesn't replace eye tracking, I should hasten to say. It doesn't replace eye tracking, because we need eye tracking to see then what people need more time to focus on. But what that really tells you, that what it allows you to do, is basically to say, well, now we can better ease the process because it's an automatic analysis. It works in the cloud. You can take a snapshot, you can see the heat map basically, then you can rearrange things and you can basically take a new snapshot, and that will tell you whether that really changed anything. Are people more or less likely to look at your product or the signage, for example, inside the store? So, take a little circus, for example. We can look at the web page, and so on. There's several different ways. And this is kind of just a store in Denmark. This is kind of a different way of showing this. And we use what we call a fog map instead of a heat map, showing the most salient regions of the store. So for example, there's a table down here. Nobody's probably going to see it automatically unless they're actively looking for that. They will see the oranges up here, probably due to the contrast. So the things that are automatically driving people's attention is things like movement, density, contrast, changes in angles, and stuff like that. So a lot of these things we know so well, and we can mimic them by using mathematical algorithms, that they're very good for understanding, what do people automatically want to look for. Now, one of the things that could be interesting is to understand how consumers, how we can help consumers inside the store, just by tweaking their attention. And this is a study that we did for a major retail company in the US, basically trying to understand customer frustration. So people who are walking through the aisles, when they were asked, how do you think it is about navigating the stores? A lot of this over-frequent response was that it's confusing. I can't find the products I'm looking for. And when we look at the eye tracking, it didn't make sense. We look at the stores, it didn't make sense because there were actually, signage up there, everywhere was signs. It should be straight out the box, should really be easy to find your way. But people still complained. So what we did was to go back here and basically do an analysis using this heat map, kind of neurovision as we call it. And what I can show you here, let's see if we can do this. Let's see here, let's stop it here. Sorry. Let's see here. Probably can't see that. But let's go over here. What we can see here is that we can then walk to the times in which we actually have the signs. Up here. What you can see, there's no saliency, there's no pull factor, there's no automatic attention to the signs. So people need more time to find them. So that could be the problem. That kind of hinted at least that it could be a problem. So what we did was, we went back to the drawing board and said, well, what about just photoshopping those images? So what I did was to take the middle image here, or middle sign here, Photoshop it to increase the brightness and the contrast, and then rerun the analysis, just on that image. What it showed was that, well, basically, boom, there was a high saliency to that sign. What it demonstrates then is that we can go back to the client and say, well, what about just, instead of changing the entire signs, how about just putting a spot on the sign? Just increase the brightness of or the contrast on the signs just by a spot. And they went back and did that. Kind of the anecdotal evidence is that it seemed to work. It seemed that customers really were looking at it more. And what we also confirmed that later on with an eye tracking, kind of mobile eye tracking, was that people did tend to look more at the signs. So this is kind of a way that is, you've probably not heard about before, but it is also a way to use neuromarketing and applied neuroscience. It's not to do all the brain scans every single time, but actually do some of the insights from neuroscience and apply it in a direct way like this. Of course, then you can use it for, outdoors or outside the store to make sure that people are actually seeing what you're interested in seeing. So will they actually see the sign here? Will they see this sign? What is most interesting for you? And the old dictum of less is more really applies to this. If you want people to see something more, you need to take something else away. So attention is still the kind of limited and precious resource, and we should use that, have that in mind. Okay. So when it comes to in-store attention, just kind of a brief overview of that. Well, what type of attention are you looking for? How do you expect your consumers and your customers to see your products or your information? You need to distinguish between bottom-up and top-down. And there are different tools you can use to then apply these methods to better understand those attentional mechanisms. Bottleneck issues: are you presenting way too much information? Are people blown away by all the information? And make an attentional plan, basically, if you're really working in retail, but also in ads. How much resources will people spend on anything in an ad, for example? And Steve Sands also alluded to this, and he mentioned this in his talk, is that every single time you're presenting something, we have this kind of latency factor afterwards. We can't just present boom, boom, boom things one at a time. We have this latency. Once people are really focused on something, there's at least 500 milliseconds, half a second, that people need to reset their brains, basically. So you can't just smack a lot of information in there. So again, this is kind of another limitation issue. So the next thing is to say, well, okay, we got people's attention. How do we deal with that? How can we make sure that people are actually aroused and motivated by what they see? And Steve Genker has mentioned this several times through his talks, is that we have these kind of fast and slow systems. How many of you have kids? Right. So if you, for example, if you imagine, just visualize that your kid is hurt. Basically, his or her finger is hurt in a way. That is a way, if you really kind of get into that feeling, that's a way to get emotional responses through this kind of slow system, right? As a parent, and we all know that process, I hope they're not hurting themselves and all that. That is very different from, if there was a huge sound, a kind of explosion outside, and you basically talk together, kind of the immediate response. So that's the fast and the slow response in emotions. Now, what we do tend to focus very much on when it comes to neuromarketing are these kind of immediate responses. And it has a long track record now. It's 15 to 20 years that we basically have seen again and again and again that these fast responses are highly predictive of what people are doing. So for example, in a study by Brian Knudson from Stanford at that time at least, showed that, well, when people are looking at a product, we can measure the brain responses at that time. This is an fMRI study where they basically show their product, then they show the price, then they ask people to make up their minds whether they want to buy that product or not with real money, and then they basically made a description of when they felt like making up their minds. People feel like making their decision at the very end. They say, well, I kind of look at it, and I look at the price, and I make up my mind, kind of sum it all together. Yes, that's when I feel like making up my mind. What he did was to basically go back in time. This is 4, 8, 12 seconds before they felt like making up their mind, 8 to 12 seconds before that. And he saw that at the very product viewing time. The response of what's called the ventral striatum, or the nucleus accumbens, was highly predictive of actual purchase. So this means that just looking at the responses here, at the time that you look at a product, is highly predictive of basically what you're going to do. So, from brain science, from neuroscience point of view, this is actually doable. So, of course, this is an fMRI study, and if you want to run an fMRI, it's a high price range. So, the lab that I've been involved in for several years, we have something like 5 MRI scanners, and trust me, they're really expensive to run. So what I try to do is to go on the cheap. Really challenge myself, and I know Steve Sands really, well, this is not the optimal headset, but I wanted to do that challenge. I want to say, let's take a cheap, off-the-shelf EEG set, hack ourselves into the system, and see if we can use that for anything at all. So not only do the mobile stuff, let's just EEG, let's see if we can use EEG, we know that will work. What about making a challenge? What we did was to show that the EEG was actually highly predictive of actual purchase as well. During the product viewing time, we could predict not only the likelihood that people are going to buy that product, but also how much they were willing to pay for the product. So one of the things I'm in the process of now is actually publishing this work. It's currently in review. What I did was, of course, to then make the next step, which is to hack ourselves even deeper into the system, connected to a smartphone. Put the smartphone in people's pockets, as we see here. And well, basically what we did was to then test inside the store. EEG and eye tracking inside people's store. So again, this is not an optimal setup because the EEG system is in no way the optimal one, but that's part of the challenge. For me, that's part of the challenge. Well, so what we did here was basically to say, first of all, can we use this technology? Can we use it to predict what people are actually going to do? And if we do this with this set, we can test inside the store, we can test augmented reality, we can test product testing and so forth. So, I should mention, we moved on to do some other systems as well. So, and this is kind of just an example of raw data from the EEG, just a reconstruction from the EEG, and also reconstruction from the raw data from the visual fixations inside the store while people are walking through the store and basically looking at the price and making some judgments. They're giving some tasks and get back there and on. So I'm going to try two different projects very shortly here and show how we are on time. Okay. So two different products, two different projects. One was about whether we can change people's attention and choice and understand the purchasing process while they're in the store. And does that really reflect in how people are actually talking and how they're responding verbally? So, let's see here. What we actually were doing was to test the effect of ads. So, can we see the effect of people being exposed to an ad on their in-store behavior? Can that change, can a particular ad, can that change people's behavior inside the store? Can it change their attitudes, their attention, their emotional engagement? Can it change their purchase behavior? And also, will people know? Will people know that they have been affected? So we did a study using this kind of setup on the G. So this is kind of not the optimal version, but it's kind of just to demonstrate as well. So we did just a 14-channel epoch emotive, and we didn't use these kind of emotive metrics, I should mention. They tend to have their own metrics. We basically pulled out all the raw data on the smartphone, then pulled them out and did the analysis. What we then did was that during the calibration procedure, we told people basically, we just want to look at the screen while we calibrate. Now we just need you to fixate, just look at the screen. We're just going to play some documentaries, some ads, some different materials that just keep focused on the screen. So that was kind of the cover story. They didn't know that they were affected at this time. What we then did was to divide people into three groups. One group saw a particular version of an ad for just 15 seconds for a particular brand of paint. A second group saw a 30-second version of that ad. And a control group saw all the other ads that the two other groups saw, except that particular ad. So what we then did was to basically give them an assignment, or 5 different assignments inside the store. One of those assignments was to go to the paint section and to basically say, well, just pick a piece of paint that you would be interested in purchasing for painting your living room. What we saw was that there was a good difference between the 3 different groups in terms of what they actually chose. So compared to the no ad group, the 50-second and 30-second ad, they were this is the percentage of people purchasing that particular brand of paint. So 78, which is it's good. But if they saw a 15-second version of the ad, 91% of the people would buy that brand. And if they saw a 30-second ad, it would be 100%. This, by the way, was something like 40 people until 40-something around that table. Well, we then asked people, we said, well, we actually did this kind of scale debriefing procedure. When they went to the checkout, we stopped them and we interviewed them. We started by having these kind of open-ended interviews and said, well, what do you think of this task? How did you go about selecting? And they kind of made their kind of almost free association responses. Then we did the next step, which we, from neuropsychology, we call it category cued recall, which we said, well, you know, when you chose a particular paint, what was the process there? Do you think you were affected in any way? Kind of going a bit more into it. And at the very end, we told them, listen, we actually showed you this ad of this brand X. Do you recognize this? And all people said they recognized it. And then we asked them, do you think you were affected in your choice by this ad? And 100% said no. Yes, I see it. No, I'm not affected by the ad. So we did see the sales numbers, right? There was a big difference. What we then did was to look at their visual attention. So this is a way to reconstruct visual attention. You use from the eye glasses, so the eye tracking glasses, and if you see it's smallish here, there's some black dots here, there are infrared markers. That allows us to kind of make this kind of reconstruction of the shelf. Independent of where people are approaching the shelf from, we can see where they're actually looking. What we see from the control group is that just focus on small things here, just looking at a particular part here, and then they're off again. The test groups, the two groups, 15 and 30 seconds ads, they were really exploring the shelf, just by comparison. Right? So this is just a way to analyze it, just to visualize those data. Right. So the second kind of study, which we basically kind of tied on to this, but also did it in a separate study in a different part of the world, is to try to understand the purchasing process itself. When is an actual purchase being made? When is the decision being made? So just as we did with the kind of the lab-based studies, and Brian Knudsen was showing that basically when people are looking at a product, they're making up their minds. It's highly predictable what's actually happening. What we then did was to do an in-store test. And when you do eye tracking, you basically know what people are looking at. So this allows you to look at the responses that people have when they're only looking at your product, that particular product, as opposed to the other product. What you can then do is to extract the information, the responses that people have to exactly that product. So the brain responses to that product, you can take out and see what is the brain response to that product as opposed to another product. What we then see, first of all, if you just look at product fixation, how much people are actually looking at that product. There's a significant difference between the product that they're actually buying as opposed to those products they don't buy. And when we looked at the motivation score, which is really much the kind of thing that also Steve Sands was talking about, is this approach avoidance metric. The higher score on that is indicative of actual purchase, motivation to look more and explore more and ultimately choose. It's highly predictive. So this just says buy, high score for the products that you eventually buy, as opposed to the product that you don't buy. So it seems, and this is crucial, is we only pulled out the data from the first 500 milliseconds. We even looked at the first 100 milliseconds, and we can predict with a 70% accuracy what people are going to choose. So basically, you can look at the first 500 milliseconds and be highly predictable what people are actually going to do. So all in all, that means that you can ask questions like, what are the exposures that people have been doing, or what are people being exposed to prior to entering the store? This could be an ad you've run for a week prior to them coming into the store, or it could be the effect of just the outside of the store on in-store behavior. So some of these things are now tangible, and people are not able, we are not able to report that verbally. But now with these protocols, it allows you to basically understand, how are people responding to effects like this inside the store. You can also look at what's actually triggering people's choice. So some of the things we also I didn't mention here, but when people want to buy a product such as a hammer drill, for example, what are they really looking at? Well, if they're looking at the neck of the thickness of the neck actually seems to be highly predictive of whether they're going to purchase and like it at all. So you might even pick up some information just from looking at the eye tracking and say, well, if the more they're actually looking at the neck of the hammer drill, the more they're likely to buy the product. We don't know that when we ask people. You will never be able to tell that. And one of the things that I'm telling more and more, and to round this up, is as market researchers, we should work more than, instead of confirming our ideas, we should work on killing our ideas. Instead of trying convincing each other that this product is really good, then trying to kill the whole idea. See if it still holds up. Really try to say, well, this is kind of a scientific endeavor, right? Is to say, if you're really giving the hardest test on your product in your ad, and it still shows that it's a good product, that people still enjoy it, and still like it, then you have a much firmer answer than just trying to confirm your ideas. So that will be all for us both, I think, for your attention, but also if you have any questions. Is there any questions? I know you're tired, but tough spot. Yes, please.
The focus mainly on your company, Neurons, the service, Neuromarketing.